Everybody, welcome back to the Kansas Deep Dive on Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Durling, and joining me once again is Steve Fleck from Sea of Tranquility. And what other shows are you on, Steve?
Pretty much just participated in Pete's show. I'm going to be joining up on another one of my friend shows, but it's kind of all different things. So yeah, pretty much just been on Pete's show. Other than that, and hammering out my own 5 year plus album. That's pretty much between that and this is what I do extracurricularly lately, besides
Uh,
lawn work.
well, Steve knows his Kansas, and anyone who has picked up uh, my recently published Let It Be Your Guide Kansas album review will read Steve's thoughts among many, many other talented contributors. And it's just good to talk to big fans of this band. Like it's just been really, really cool to meet up with people that know the band, and you don't have to get into, well, they do this and they do that. No, get right to the point and right to the deep album tracks. And that's why Steve's my co-host for this part of the deep dive. And we are talking about the fifth Kansas album, 1977, Point of No Return, with this stunning, stunning cover art. And it doesn't even end there. I mean, the back cover is awesome. The inner sleeve, looks like an old treasure map, and I've always just really, really loved the attention to detail that they put into this. Of course, none of that would matter if the album, didn't live up to expectations. And Steve, the band had a lot riding on this one, right?
It did. I mean, just as we had discussed prior with Left Overture, they broke through with a radio hit in Carry On Wayward Son. And yeah, this was kind of, all right, we've got to, follow up. I'm sure the record label wanted them to follow up and take advantage of that momentum that they had, kind of tapped into with the previous album. So I would agree with you.
Yeah. And so, Point of No Return did what Left Overture did, as Steve mentioned, gave them another one of their calling card songs. We'll get to that, but I thought it would be fun if we did the same thing we did with Left Overture. If we went through track by track, but track by track as per this 8-track version of the album. This is a Canadian one. If you're in the States, you've probably got one that's got like a dark gray, almost black casing and a totally different look. But yeah, this is the Canadian one. Kansas were not a band that, and there are a few bands like this. They didn't get up here that much. I mean, they toured here, and they had Left Overture was big, Point of No Return was big, but they were really kind of essentially an American institution. But these were big albums all over the world. Left Overture is currently at 5 million. This one, I think, is at 4 million. That's what a hit single will do for you for your album sales.
Yeah.
So we are going to start off the proper way, I guess, with the title song, Point of No Return, KNOW. Of course, what are your thoughts on this, Kansas?
Boy, rousing opener. And if anything really calls to mind that amazing artwork that you just mentioned, that song does. I just feel it in there. There it is. There's some songs and even some albums that truly reflect their album artwork, and this particular song, to me, the background is that ship going over that flat earth, and obviously, it was the album title, so that was the kind of concept that they were illustrating there on the cover. Beyond the album artwork, of course, is a fantastic, rousing opening song. Short, as it were, but Kansas had done short songs before that, and I'm just the listener. Now, bear in mind, this was my first Kansas album, so this is a lot of holds a lot of weight with me, and still does. I bought it when it was popular, and that'll give you an idea how old I am. But I remember strolling into a audio file shop. I guess it was like another hint on my age, but it was turntables, speakers, amplifiers, that type of thing. I remember walking in and seeing the Point of No Return album sitting on the turntable and just about to spin. And I thought, all right, this is fortuitous because I haven't heard it. And it's a big thing now. It's selling crazy, like crazy. Everyone's talking about it. And so, wow, it's a good thing I'm dropping into the store right now. I get to hear it. And I got to hear Point of No Return. And I remember that label also, which by that time they had adapted their own custom artwork label on the LPs, which was kind of a sign that you've made it.
Yeah,
And
very
watching
much.
that image spin around and listening really to what struck me at first was the organ, the prevalence of the organ, and of course, Steve Walsh voice.
Yeah. I
Which
think the personalized label is a variant.
that's correct. Yep.
Yeah, and you're right. You can map through a career. It's either got the label picture, but when it's personalized, yeah, that's when they're going to spend a little extra money on you.
Yep. So yeah, and altogether, just a fantastic rap, perfect opener. Nice little bridges and little flourishes. And by that time, in that store, I was hooked, and I was like, my next move is going to be to the record store, and guess what I'm going to buy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a great song. It's there. It was the first single, I think, from the album. I think it peaked at number 28. Still gets some classic rock radio play today, not as much as their two mainstay songs, but I hear it once in a while. Mm-hmm. And oddly enough, not oddly, this has happened before, but it's not a Kerry Livgren composition. This one was written by Steve Walsh, Phil Ehart, and Robbie Steinhardt, and it's like a mini epic. It does take you on a little bit of a journey, and the midsection is really turbulent and compelling, and yet it's a short little song, and it's catchy enough that radio responded to it. So yeah, it's a great way to start the album.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
So next up, and this is really weird. Next up on this 8-track, they kind of cut right to the chase, and the big one, "Dust in the Wind."
Yeah.
And I like this. I really like this Kirshner 45 sleeve. My friend Jeff Witcher found this for me. I mean, obviously, this is the other song that will outlive us all. After we truly are dust in the wind, this song will survive. It was their biggest charting song. Went all the way to number 6, I believe, in Billboard, and it crossed over to all different kinds of charts. Country stations were playing it, and
we got glitched.
And that's high praise coming from him. So what do you think that is about Dust in the Wind that just gives it its resonance?
I think it's probably twofold. I think what you've got here is you've got a song that is somewhat different in arrangement to what you have heard on the radio, even around that time. But don't forget, 1977, we had a lot of mellow pop coming over the airwaves. And so, you had your bands, your England Dan, John Ford Coley, your kind of Doobie Brothers were doing a more laid back California rock at that time. And so mellow was really kind of the thing. And so I think it hit on those two levels. One being kind of in with the times as far as being laid back and just an acoustic. And, you think about it, all your John Denver and things like that was on the radio at the time. It's similar in its concept of being laid back. But that said, the arrangement itself, being just an acoustic guitar and vocals with violin and with the right background vocals, really made it unique. And I think, obviously the violin was, the thing that put Kansas over the edge as far as, they're doing some really different sounding things. And in this case, it's making, pop radio. And like you said, all these different genres. To me, that's what, strikes me about it. I think it was, whereas on the mellow side, it wasn't a bold move. I think on the arrangement side, it was a bold move. And, one that obviously paid off. In my opinion, very, obviously very strong song, incredibly deep lyrics, and like you said, it's going to outlast all of us.
Yeah, and yeah, and you're right. It's incredibly stark. No drums, no keyboards, no piano. It's a very sparse arrangement. Beautiful acoustic guitar. The violin is just perfect for it, and you hear a little bit of percussion as the song fades out. If you're really listening close, and boy, does it really showcase Steve Walsh, because there's nothing to hide behind here. He's, and just that effortlessly great vocal, and yeah, deservedly so. It's one case where the listening public got it right. This was something special, and this was a great band that deserved to sell a lot of records. And the other thing you mentioned, the shorter songs. What another thing that's different about Point of No Return, for the first time, there's 10 songs on an album. That was the first for Kansas, because I think up until then they maxed out at 8 songs. But yeah, they were compressing their ideas. It had nothing to do with commercial considerations, but they were just getting more ideas down and getting better at editing themselves. Even though there are still some epic tracks on here. Program 1 of this 8-track closes out with Sparks of the Tempest. This is a sleeper cut. This is a deeper song. They did do it in concert a lot. This is a really good Robbie Steinhardt vocal. It's kind of a rocking tune. What do you think of this one?
Again, another one I really do like. A Livgren Walsh composition, as it were. Just kind of funky. Again,
yeah.
Doing different things. Not sure I had heard that from Kansas before, quite that. Love the Steinhardt vocal, and also the Walsh vocal in the I want to say it's not the refrain, but possibly the bridge. You've got both of them.
No turning back, the wheels turn.
Yes, yeah. And then you rip rip into this crazy Kerry Livgren solo, which he was really adept at pulling off, and he didn't really need a lot of time to do those. He could make it. He could go on, he could jam with the best of them, but Kerry was very tasteful, as was Richard Williams, in making these short, powerful, distinct statements on the guitar. That said, the vocals to me stand out in this tune, and I think, like you mentioned, the little percussion in the background. I think some maybe congas, if I'm thinking, if I'm remembering correctly. Again, this is going back with me for a while, but and the riff at the end is one that young me picked up the guitar and tried to learn, and just the way that ending was the coda for the song, was very strong way to end it for me.
Yeah, they were really good at combining. They'd have a riff like that, but then they've got the violin, dun, 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 like they'd out over the top of it. And Steve Walsh on the organ in that midsection, the da 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 da, like he just has the right tone and the right fills, I guess, organ fills to fill out the whole soundscape. Yeah, it's a great one. So we're Clunk. We're now in program 2, and one of, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong about this, you can correct me, I think only 3 recorded instrumentals on a Kansas album. I think this was the first. There was Musicato from the Power album, and then more recently on the Absence of Presence, there was Propulsion 1. Is that the name of it?
Okay.
But first up, we had the Spider, which really showcases Walsh's abilities on the keyboards.
Yeah, the Spider is, as this album exists in the LP version, the album side, which most are familiar with, to me is just one of those. To me, this is a perfect album, pretty much soup to nuts, and I'll explain my criticisms a little bit later. But music-wise, this is their perfect album. I gave this the top rating of all of their albums, which was not easy to do. In some of my reviews back on like one of those very popular commerce websites years ago. And it was a tough thing to do, but I just think it's the most focused. And, talk about, a blazing display, which was the Spider. It's got all the key synth sounds of the day which I guess was the ARP synthesizer, polyphonic, all of those kind of synth buzz sounds, along with, playing bass sounds and playing lead sounds and kind of ripping through it. Really, really great display of keyboard sounds, and those really newest sounds, I would say, of the day. Along with obviously Walsh's organ. But I really love the Spider. It doesn't go on too long, and it also fits within the confines of transition to portrait, which to me was the perfect. I think just messing around with this order of songs is a bit sacrilegious, even though it's fun to look at what was on that 8-track cassette, because it just fits so well.
Well, they leave it alone here because, I mean, the two songs, there's no real break. There's just that keyboard tone, which which goes into which goes into Portrait He Knew, which is that's a staple, that's a classic, and that's up next. They don't cut it off. It was a single. It didn't hit the top 40, but it was catchy enough to get on the top 100 somewhere. This is one of Carey's character studies. This one was about Albert Einstein, I believe.
That's correct. I remember listening to Rockline with, believe it or not, with Phil Ehart and John Elefante back in '82, I guess, when Vinyl Confessions came out, and a caller asked the question who Point of No Return was about. And I think it was John who replied, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was Einstein. And that's what John said in 1982. Remember listening to that. But and how deep a lyric do you really want? I mean, this is Kerry Livgren, at his sharpest. He was going through, spiritual transitional phase of life. He kept the song, after converting to Christianity, and then redid it with AD, which is also an excellent version, and switched the subject, to the religious side of things as opposed to Einstein. But, here's a song that's just really timeless, has all of the Kansas elements in it. Love the chugging, again, their guitars. I always loved how they use the guitar, and that kind of chugging, just always hooked me in. I always like a nice heavy guitar background, like my buddy Pete Pardo, and I just love everything about the song, and of course the ending. I mean, blazing, rocking. It might be a good time to bring up here on the CD that came out in 2001. I want to say was a remaster, and it included a remix of this song. Have you ever heard that, Tim?
I don't have that remastered version. No, I've just got the
that's
original issue of it.
That is a reason to get that, because I guess Jeff Glicksman said, they were rushed, right? Which they always were.
Yeah.
The album out so that they could tour the album and sell the album, which was the way it worked back then. But Glicksman went back and did a remix, well worth checking out. I mean, whatever he did, that thing is brutally good. He opened up the sound. And that will be one of my criticisms of the recording and engineering on Point of No Return, and my only criticism of the album. But he opened up all of the sounds, and what he achieved was masterful. And I just wish he would have a go at the entire album. I really would. And what he came up with, interestingly, was a sound not unlike Left Overture.
Yeah, it's interesting. That is true, and I have heard that, and I kind of hear it too. It's not quite as crisp as Left Overture. It's a good sounding album, but it's just not quite as, doesn't have as high fidelity as Left Overture. Left Overture is so pristinely good. This is just a good sounding, to the audiophile, and I'm not really much of an audiophile, but I hear it. I hear a greater separation of instruments on Left Overture. But I mean, the fact that they were an album a year, touring, get it out. Yep. It's a fine sounding album. And I realize we're jumbling the tracks here because Program 2 ends with another heavy one, Lightning's Hand. This is another cool Robbie Steinhardt vocal. This
Yep.
one is a very dramatic song, and it has been commented. It's commented on in the book, in my book, that you could almost picture this as part of a musical. This being a big performance number.
Totally dramatic. I think I had mentioned in one of our other shows on your channel where I pictured Steinhardt singing this singing. I think it was "Child of Innocence."
Yes, I think so.
From like a mountaintop, commanding thunder and lightning with his hand, and obviously, well, there it is.
Yeah.
To me, bigger than life. I have my own image of Steinhardt. Again, back to John Elefante in that 1982 interview, somebody mentioned Robbie Steinhardt, and they were kind of joking around, laughing. And I think it was John again who said he could correct me on this, but I think he jokingly said Robbie is Bigfoot, and everybody laughed. He just that presence, that appearance.
Yeah.
And I just see this as Steinhardt, even though it is a Walsh Livgren tune. But I mean, Robbie just handles this with acumen as always. And it's a blistering rocker with all kinds of cool lyrics to kind of think about. But his spoken lines, especially in that kind of refrain where they use the dynamics come down and then Robbie builds up. That is extremely dramatic.
I hear them moan, I hear them cry because they feel I belong to them. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really good. And what I picture, and this is maybe you can explain this as a younger fan. I remember seeing this a couple of times and being really confused by it. But when the Best Of album came out in 1984, they put out a video that was a medley of a bunch of songs from the album. It starts out with a little boy going to sleep, and I guess he has a nightmare, and then it ends. Get up, go to bed, whatever. And you know what I'm talking about?
I hadn't seen it, but strangely enough,
okay. So go on YouTube and type in "Best of Kansas Medley 1984."
Cool.
It combines 6 or 7 songs, all that were on the Best Of. But there is one scene where it goes into the heavy part from Wayward Son, and you've got this old man, presumably made to look like John Brown, and he's doing the commanding the lightning strike and stuff. It's a really weird video. Like, you'd think that they would have made a video for Perfect Lover, which was the new song and the single, but no, they did this weird medley, and the band's not really in it. If you look really close at the end, you can see them on TV. It's the Point of No Return video. And really, really weird video. If somebody out there knows the story on that video, where that decision came from, please tell me, because I've always been kind of fascinated by it. But anyway, that's what Lightning's Hand conjures up for me. Now, we are getting into longer tracks, the way that this track listing has been jumbled up. So we've got now, the nice thing about this 8-track is that none of the songs are split in half.
No,
there are no song breaks on, so it's clean that way. So program 3 starts off with Closet Chronicles. This one, it's about Howard Hughes, I believe.
Yeah, I think I had heard the same thing. Very emotional track. Starts off very, very pretty with just the organ. And then the ones carried through the current and being swept away. A nice emotional melody, by Walsh, or assuming the melody was by Walsh, but written with Carey. This combines, again, what a lot of, Kansas's strengths, which is dynamics, which you'll find with, any prog rock band for the most part. They all have that little King Crimson in them where they want to go really quiet, and then maybe not that extreme, but they do it extremely well. And this is one of those Kansas tracks that to me is very thematic. It's the word I'm looking for. Almost like rousing with the synthesizer.
Regal sound,
right? Yeah, very much so. And it takes you through all of the kind of emotions and based on the lyrical, where the lyrics take you. The music, finishes right there. It's like I think you had mentioned one of the longer tracks on the album. It's like 6.5 minutes. Not quite the longest, but the second longest, and really comes off extremely well live, of course. Most of their tracks do. They're a very tight unit. But yeah, I double thumbs up on Closet Chronicles. Again, another different kind of sounding arrangement, different kind of song.
Yeah. And I asked this question in the book too, because it is late 1977, and I have to wonder if there's a little bit in there, the line, "I heard the king was dying, I heard the king was dead." I've always wondered, would that be they're talking about Elvis there?
Yeah, very good point, right? That was that not the year Elvis died?
Yeah, he died in August.
August. Yeah, I knew it was August, and I was wondering 77, 76. Yeah. Yeah. Very good point. These guys were of that generation where, they appreciated Elvis for sure. They all loved the Beatles, but Elvis, the Beatles, not too far off.
Yeah. So speaking of emotional songs, the next one up on here is "Nobody's Home." This song is heavy. I mean, this song is really affecting and really emotional, and there's a genuine melancholy written in here. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. It was probably the one that took me. I want to say this one, and I won't mention it now, but the longest track on the album. Those were actually the ones that took me the longest to get into. Again, I was new to Kansas, and so Nobody's Home was, to me, a bigger kind of meal to digest, right? Had, very moody, like you said, very emotional, very, dark in places, melancholy in places, especially with that, that violin line, where, you're going into minor keys and then back to major, and just everything about it really kind of strikes me as depicting kind of a hollowness, if you will, and it definitely brings that emotion across.
Especially in that before that last chorus where they don't say "Nobody's Home," it's just the knocks.
The knock is such a great.
Yeah.
I would love to see some of the treatment done for Kansas and this album, maybe even like they did with Queen, where they went back with the engineer, like, went back with Roy Thomas Baker, the producer, and Brian May, and sat down and, just broke down, well, here's this sound, here this is, and they sat at the mixing board, and they did it with some of the Sabbath albums. Love to know what and who knocked on what.
Yeah, the classic album series that they did in the UK. I wish they had done one of the Kansas albums, because I really enjoy the way they did those. Yeah, I've got the Queen one, I've got the Deep Purple one, the Def Leppard, Metallica, the Rush one, the Fleetwood Mac. They do such a good job, and once you know those little details, you never forget them. Like, Brian May and Roger Taylor talking about one of the silly songs on A Night at the Opera. I don't want to get too off track, but they're basically thymballs. They get thymballs in their, Seaside Rendezvous, maybe something like that. Maybe It's Good Company. I don't know. One of those two songs.
One of those, yeah.
But I would love to see that. The Kansas, they deserve that treatment. We're trying here, folks. We're trying, but we weren't there. So, so that leaves us with the last two tracks that I haven't talked about. First is a concert staple, usually played very early on in the show, Paradox.
Boy, if there could be a favorite Kansas song, that's the top 10 for sure for me. Maybe top 5, could be. That just, sums up Kansas in under 4 minutes. Not an unheard of arrangement. They've done things like that before. But this was, to me, just all compact, and in less than 4 minutes, you had every trick in their book. Carrie's triplets, that just is, prevalent throughout their recording history was the triplet. And that's one thing that even as a musician, when I was listening, I considered it their sound, but I never was able to define it as triplet until Steve Morse put out a CD called, I think, something Influences, and he did his Kansas influence, but it was all original material.
Wasn't that called Major Impacts?
Major Impacts, that's it. Thank you. And of course, being in Kansas, right, obviously a huge thing. And in his liner notes, he talked about how, Carrie used to, always write in these triplets, and of course Morris nothing gets past that guy. And so in his arrangement, he did it and just putting the accent, which on different notes in the triplet, really makes a big difference in that. You're hearing that, throughout here. Yeah. Paradox is just one of the finest vocal lines Steve Walsh ever produced. And that's saying a lot. It's powerful, really powerful. Could be one of his finest hours, and instrumentally everything is top notch. And man, do they throw in the different key signatures, like in a salad. It's an enjoyable listen to me, but it's not just that. It's a good song. It's not just an exercise in acrobatics.
It's got hooks. It's got memorable melodic parts, and also Paradox was. They're not likely to put that as a single. It was the B-side of Dust in the Wind, and 349. So again, kind of like Point of No Return, the song. It's an epic. It's an epic feeling song. Doesn't have an epic length.
Yeah, exactly. True favorite.
So we close out, and one thing I'll say about the 8-track is if it starts and it ends with the proper song. So obviously that takes us to Hopelessly Human.
Yeah.
If I was going to rate the songs on this album, not that it's a bad song, it's just that everything that's come before has been so good. Hopelessly Human is just a winding down kind of song. It's not bad. It's just there. What do you think of this one?
I agree with your point. Not my favorite on the album, but again, took me a while to get into as a young kid. And now I can obviously appreciate it for what it is and what it was meant to be. But again, it's a deep thinker, and this one was left alone to Carrie to write, and it's very effective. Not the strongest track on the album, but you said like a kind of a wind up, and it is a nice way to wind up the album. And some beautiful passages in there, and some beautiful lyrics in there, and chord changes, and dynamics, of course. And again, it gives Robbie Steinhardt a chance to stretch out again, which whenever I heard a Steinhardt vocal, I was always happy to hear it. When you've got one of the best singers of his era, top 3 probably of that time. I think we talked about this: Lou Gramm, Steve Perry, Steve Walsh. They were kind of the biggest of that era. It's tough to get in time, and I always appreciated hearing Robbie sing, because he just always had a different take, and obviously different timbre, different atmosphere when he opened his mouth. And this is a nice kind of wrap up style song with him at the mic. It's great.
Yeah, Robbie too. It was a good compliment to Steve Walsh's voice, because if they'd been in the same range, I don't think it would have worked. They'd have been competing, but since they didn't sound anything alike, they complemented each other very well. Again, like Queen, much like when Brian or Roger would take a lead vocal.
Yeah.
It would give the listener, I don't want to say the ear fatigue would set in, but it's different. And you feel like you're getting almost multiple bands within an album, same thing with bands like Toto or Fleetwood Mac. Like you've got the Eagles, you've got all these different voices, and that probably the Beatles were, one of the main proponents of that. So Robbie's vocals are perfect. Robbie could have probably been the lead vocalist in a blues rock band like a Foghat or something like that, and nobody would have batted an eye. Like, yeah, he's good. But
sure.
When you're standing there with Steve Walsh, but then again, Robbie's got that violin, and that's that key signature thing. So Point of No Return, 1977. One of the easier Kansas albums to track in. This is a really old Canadian cassette of it, and so old that it doesn't even have. It's got a sticker on it.
Nice.
So if you're just getting into Kansas, you could do worse. You could do a lot worse than starting off with Point of No Return, which is one of the 15 studio albums we cover in Let It Be Your Guide, the Kansas album review. I'll have the link to that below. So there you go. That's our 2 cents worth, as it were. On Point of No Return, I am going to have to check out that remastered version, Steve. Now that you mentioned that, I've also been meaning to get the remaster too for the show, because the original CD omits Closet Chronicles, so that's kind of been a hole in my collection. But I'll take care of it.
Yeah.
So Steve, thank you so much for doing this. We're going to keep doing the deep dive. We're going to go all the way through. I'm going to have different co-hosts, but Steve's sticking around one more time for the next one, and we'll talk some more Kansas then. So yes, thanks for watching Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Hope you're enjoying the deep dive. If you're a Kansas fan, I can honestly say thanks to all the contributors. You will enjoy the Kansas book. Let it be your guide. So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks, Steve, and we'll see you all later.